June 6, 1944, Kharagpur Airfield, India. The heat arrived early over the Bengal plain. By mid-morning, the steel skin of the new bombers was already hot to the touch, and the dust thrown up by trucks hung in the still air around the runways. Ground crews worked with shirts darkened by sweat, moving ladders along the polished fuselages of aircraft unlike any they had serviced before. The name stenciled on the nose of one read simply, B-29. At that moment in the war, the aircraft was both a promise and a burden. It had cost more to develop than the Manhattan Project would in its early years. It required new engines, new training, new logistics chains stretching halfway around the world. And despite all of it, many senior officers privately doubted it would justify the effort. The B-29 Superfortress had been designed for a different kind of war than the one crews were currently flying. It was meant to operate at altitudes above 30,000 feet, beyond the reach of most fighters and anti-aircraft guns. Its pressurized cabins allowed crews to function where oxygen was thin and temperatures fell far below freezing. Remote-controlled gun turrets, directed by analog computers, gave it defensive reach without exposing gunners to the slipstream. On paper, it was the most advanced bomber ever built. In practice, it was plagued by fires. The Wright R-3350 engines that powered the Superfortress were powerful but temperamental. Poor cooling and tight cowlings led to overheating. Valves burned. Cylinders failed. On more than one occasion, engines caught fire on the ground before takeoff. Mechanics learned to watch the gauges with the same intensity as pilots. Yet the aircraft kept coming. By mid-1944, the United States Army Air Forces had committed to using the B-29 to strike the Japanese home islands from bases in India and China under a plan known as Operation Matterhorn. It was a logistical gamble of enormous scale. Fuel, bombs, spare parts. Everything had to be flown over the Himalayas from India into forward bases in China. The route was known simply as the Hump. Weather over those mountains killed men without the enemy ever appearing. Cargo aircraft vanished into clouds and ice. Every gallon of fuel delivered to China often required several gallons burned just to get it there. A single B-29 combat mission from China could consume so much fuel that multiple transport flights were needed to support it. Crews understood the arithmetic. They joked grimly that each bomb dropped on Japan represented the effort of dozens of men hauling supplies across the sky. The early raids reflected these constraints. High-altitude precision bombing against Japanese industrial targets produced limited results. Cloud cover obscured aiming points. High winds at altitude, the jet stream, though not yet fully understood, pushed bombs far from their targets. Reports showed wide dispersal patterns and modest damage. Losses from combat were not catastrophic, but the mechanical attrition was severe. Engines failed, aircraft diverted or ditched. Commanders read the summaries and asked hard questions about cost and effect. Some in Washington quietly wondered if the B-29 had arrived too late to matter. Then the geography of the war changed. By the summer of 1944, American forces were advancing across the Central Pacific. The capture of the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam placed Japan within range of sustained strategic bombing without the burden of the Hump. Seabays and engineers moved quickly, carving massive runways from coral and volcanic soil. Entire airfields appeared where jungle had stood weeks before. The 21st Bomber Command would operate from these islands under the leadership of Major General Haywood S. Hansell, a proponent of high-altitude precision bombing. His doctrine matched the B-29's original design philosophy. Crews trained for daylight attacks against aircraft factories and industrial plants. On November 24, 1944, from bases in the Marianas, B-29s struck Tokyo for the first time. The distance was over 1,500 miles round-trip. The bombers climbed high, forming long streams across the Pacific. Japanese defenses reacted, but interception at those altitudes proved difficult. Still, the results again fell short of expectations. Weather and winds scattered bomb patterns. Bomb damage assessments showed limited disruption to production. The aircraft had reached Japan, but reaching decisive effect was another matter. Inside command circles, patience thinned. In January 1945, leadership of 21st Bomber Command passed to Major General Curtis LeMay. He was not a man given to decorative language. He studied reports, crew debriefings, and weather data. He examined the jet stream measurements that showed winds exceeding 100 knots at bombing altitude. He reviewed Japanese civil defense construction, wooden homes clustered tightly in dense urban districts. LeMay drew conclusions that departed sharply from previous doctrine. He reasoned that high-altitude precision attacks were ill-suited to the conditions over Japan. Cloud cover and wind made accuracy unreliable. Japanese industry was also dispersed into small workshops embedded within cities. Destroying a single factory left production scattered elsewhere. If the industrial web could not be cut at a few points, it might be burned through entirely. The shift he ordered was stark. Bombers would fly lower at night. Defensive guns and even some gunners would be removed to lighten weight. Payloads would consist largely of incendiaries, particularly the M69 napalm bomblet, designed to ignite structures rapidly. The change carried risk. Lower altitude meant greater exposure to anti-aircraft fire and night fighters. Crews accustomed to altitude safety would now fly in darkness over enemy cities. On March 9, 1945, crews received their briefing on Tinian. Their target was Tokyo. Weather forecasts predicted strong winds at altitude but manageable conditions lower down. Routes were assigned to approach from different directions to spread fires. Each bomber carried clusters of incendiaries designed to break open and scatter flaming gel across wide areas. Takeoff began before sunset. One after another, heavy bombers rolled down the long coral runways, engines straining, lifting into the Pacific dusk. Navigation lights winked into formation and then disappeared as aircraft turned toward Japan. The flight north took hours. Crews checked instruments, recalculated fuel, and watched for signs of engine trouble. Over the target area, Pathfinder aircraft arrived first, marking zones with incendiaries. Then the main force followed. Bombs fell over the most densely built districts of Tokyo, where wooden houses stood close together along narrow streets. The first fires took hold quickly, then the winds fed them. Within a short time, individual blazes merged into something larger. Firestorms developed, creating their own drafts. Flames moved across blocks faster than men could run. Smoke rose thousands of feet, visible to crews miles away. Some reported the smell of burning reaching their aircraft. Japanese firefighting efforts were overwhelmed. Water systems failed. Evacuation routes clogged. The destruction spread through the night. When the last bombers turned for home, large sections of the city were burning. Damage estimates later showed that roughly 16 square miles of Tokyo had been destroyed in a single raid. Casualty figures reached into the tens of thousands. It was one of the most destructive air attacks in history. For the B-29 program, the effect was immediate and undeniable. The aircraft that had been criticized for cost and complexity had delivered a level of destruction no previous bomber force had achieved against Japan. Results were visible from reconnaissance photographs and intelligence reports alike, but the campaign did not end there. In the following weeks, similar raids struck Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, and dozens of other cities. Each mission followed the same basic logic: low altitude, night approach, concentrated incendiary loads. Japanese urban construction made the fires effective. Industrial output, transportation, and civilian infrastructure suffered heavily. Yet Japan did not surrender. Despite the scale of destruction, the government continued the war. Military leaders prepared defenses against invasion. Civilians endured air raids with mounting hardship. The B-29s returned again and again, their silver fuselages reflecting the sun as they climbed from the Marianas. The Superfortress had proven it could reach Japan and devastate its cities. Whether that alone could end the war remained uncertain. By the summer of 1945, new developments were underway, developments involving a weapon of unprecedented power and a small number of specially modified B-29s set apart from the rest. Those aircraft belonged to the 509th Composite Group. Their story would intersect with the final chapter of the air war over Japan. 6 August 1945, North Field, Tinian, Mariana Islands. Before dawn, ground crews moved under shaded lights along a single B-29 parked apart from the others. Its bomb bay held one weapon, longer and heavier than standard ordnance, secured with unusual care. The aircraft's name, painted near the nose, read, Enola Gay. The 509th Composite Group had trained for months in isolation. Its crews practiced long overwater navigation, high-altitude single bomb drops, and precise timing. Security around their work was constant. Many participants understood only fragments of the whole. They knew the weapon was different. They knew the mission carried weight beyond ordinary operations. Colonel Paul W. Tibbets, Jr., the aircraft commander, conducted his final walk-around in the humid dark. Weather aircraft had already departed toward Japan to report on cloud conditions over potential targets. Forecasts mattered. Visual delivery was required. At 2:45, Enola Gay began its takeoff roll. The runway lights stretched ahead in a straight white line. The bomber lifted heavily, engines steady, and turned north into the night. The primary target was Hiroshima, a city of military and industrial significance that had seen relatively little previous bombing. Its urban area lay in a delta, rivers dividing districts where factories and troop facilities stood among civilian structures. The aiming point selected was the Aioi Bridge, recognizable from the air. Hours passed over open water. Crew members checked instruments and reviewed procedures. The bomb, known by the code name Little Boy, required in-flight preparation. Final arming steps were completed carefully to reduce risk during takeoff and climb. Near Japan, rendezvous aircraft joined to observe and record. Weather reports confirmed acceptable visibility over Hiroshima. The city lay clear below scattered clouds. At 8:15 local time, from roughly 31,000 feet, the bomb was released. The aircraft banked sharply to escape the predicted blast effects. 43 seconds later, a flash filled the sky behind them. Even with protective goggles, the light was described as brighter than sunlight. A rising column formed, boiling upward with dust and smoke. On the ground, destruction radiated outward from the detonation point. Structures collapsed or burned across wide areas. Military facilities, factories, and homes alike were affected. Fires spread through districts already damaged by the blast. Casualties were severe. Communications faltered. The scale was unlike any previous attack on a single city. Reconnaissance soon confirmed extensive destruction. Yet within Japan's leadership, debate continued. Some sought terms, others argued the nation could still fight, hoping for conditions more favorable than unconditional surrender. 3 days later, another mission was prepared. August 9, 1945, Tinian, the B-29 boxcar, commanded by Major Charles W. Sweeney, carried the second weapon, codenamed Fat Man. The primary target was Kokura, an arsenal city. Weather and smoke from prior bombing obscured the aiming point. After multiple passes and growing fuel concerns, the crew diverted to the secondary target, Nagasaki. Clouds complicated the approach there as well. A brief break allowed visual sighting. The bomb was released at 11:02. The detonation occurred over an industrial valley containing shipyards and ordnance works. Terrain limited some blast effects compared to a flat plain, but destruction within the valley was immense. Fires followed. That same day, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and advanced into Manchuria, attacking the Kwantung Army. Japan now faced strategic shock from multiple directions: air, land, and sea. Its shipping was shattered. Many cities were burned. Fuel and food were scarce. The prospect of invasion loomed. Within the Japanese government, meetings extended late into the night. The question was no longer how to win, but how to end the war without the complete collapse of the state. The unprecedented nature of the new bombs weighed heavily alongside the cumulative impact of months of conventional bombing and blockade. August 15, 1945, Tokyo. Emperor Hirohito's recorded address was broadcast to the nation. In formal language, he spoke of enduring the unendurable and accepting the Allied terms. For many listeners, the phrasing was indirect, but the meaning was clear. Hostilities would cease. Across the Pacific, B-29 crews received word in stages. Some were already scheduled for further missions. Others stood down where they were. Maintenance crews who had worked endless hours in heat and coral dust finally paused. The long air campaign from the Marianas, which had carried the Superfortress from uncertain beginnings to decisive operations, had reached its end. The B-29's wartime record was complex. Early doubts about cost, reliability, and effectiveness were real. Engines failed. Logistics strained. High-altitude doctrine met weather and wind that limited accuracy. Yet the aircraft's range and payload ultimately allowed sustained pressure on the Japanese home islands in a way no earlier bomber could achieve. From the capture of the Marianas to the final missions in August 1945, the Superfortress became central to the strategic air campaign. Its crews flew long hours over water, navigated by stars and radar, and faced weather as often as enemy fire. The shift to low-altitude incendiary attacks brought results measured in square miles burned and industries disrupted, but also in heavy civilian loss, facts recorded in after-action reports and post-war surveys alike. The atomic missions, flown by specially configured B-29s, introduced a new and terrible dimension to warfare. Their role in Japan's surrender remains studied and debated, but their immediate destructive power was beyond dispute. They marked the arrival of a nuclear age that reshaped military planning and international politics for generations. When the war ended, many B-29s returned home or were reassigned. Some served in later conflicts. Others were scrapped as technology advanced. A few survived in museums, their aluminum skins reflecting quiet hangar lights instead of searchlights and fire below. The men who flew and maintained them carried memories that did not fit neatly into victory parades. They remembered engine fires, long climbs into thin air, the glow of cities on the horizon at night, and the friends who did not return. The story of the B-29 is not only about an aircraft once called a failure. It is about the scale of effort required to project power across oceans, the adaptation of strategy under pressure, and the human weight carried inside machines of war. The outcome of 1945 ended the deadliest conflict the world had known to that date. It also left questions and responsibilities that did not end with the signing of documents. Today, the remaining superfortresses stand as artifacts of engineering and warning. Their presence invites study rather than celebration, memory rather than spectacle. We remember the airmen who flew, the workers who built, the civilians who endured, and the lives on all sides altered or lost. The record they left is written in logs, photographs, and quiet rows of names. To remember them is to look plainly at what happened, to measure cost as well as outcome, and to carry forward the hope that such destruction need not be repeated.